hi everybody. I'm Casey. Is there anyone in this room I haven't met yet? I know you, Joe.
Oh, sorry.
Good. That's how it ought to be. Okay. So I'm going to be talking about the ELD mandate. There are some vendors in the room here that are not only sponsoring NATSA, but they're also here to help me answer questions. So if you have anything really detailed, I might call on them to help me out. But we're basically just going to cover the mandate in general, what it does and does not say. The exemptions to the mandate. The Federal Register also covered a few special considerations for leased and rented vehicles and for business relationships with owner-operators. So we'll talk about those. We'll talk a little bit about enforcement dates, when these things are due, and what we can expect from roadside enforcement. And then we'll talk about self-certification. And then after that, I'm going to get kind of personal with you guys, and I'm going to share with you what my plan is to get through this next 15 months. We'll talk about ELDs and IFTA, and then we'll open it up for questions. Okay. So some things that the mandate is required to do, right? So the ELDs are required to be connected to the ECM, the electronic control module, and they have to be mounted to prevent driving distractions. So that could mean two devices. You can have a plug into your ECM and then your smartphone or tablet off to the side. You can have one device that does both functions. It's something you'll want to think about when you're looking at the kind of device you want to choose. The ELD is required to transmit data on demand for audit and enforcement. It's required to notify the driver of any compliance issues, and that covers a lot of stuff. A compliance issue could be, hey, the GPS isn't working. A compliance issue could be, hey, we're unplugged here. It could be any number of things. It could be you're out of service, you're out of hours. So it has to be able to tell you those things automatically. It also has to provide the graph grid, that picture of the driver's logs that we're all very familiar with, either on a printout or on a display. And there's a lot of distinction between when you can have a printout and when you can have a display. So it's something you want to bear in mind, okay? And then any edits have to be approved by the driver. Now, this was really the first place in the Federal Register where the FMCSA started to hit hard on driver harassment. The original ELD mandate was thrown out because it didn't do enough to prevent driver harassment. So there are pages and pages in this mandate. This is one of the ways the FMCSA is trying to protect the drivers. And then the 7 points you see over here, this is what the ELD is actually required to capture at least once an hour and whenever there's a change in the duty status. So that's what the ELD is required to actually do, okay? Some things it's not required to do. The ELD does not have to allow real-time tracking of the driver. So if I'm a dispatcher, there's nothing in the ELD that says I have to be able to see where my trucks are all the time. And then it's not required to be extremely accurate on the GPS pings either. If the driver is on duty, the pings have to be within 1 mile. If they're off duty, it's only within 10 miles. Now, who in here does IFTA tax reporting? Who can see a problem with the accuracy of these pings? Okay, so something they discussed in the Federal Register is that the FMCSA suggested that ELDs might want to offer more than one report. So you want one report for hours of service. You maybe want a different report for your IFTA IRP reporting. The point is that these devices are allowed to provide multiple kinds of information, but when it comes to the hours of service requirements, this is the accuracy of the pings we're looking for. And that's really to protect the driver's privacy, which is another thing that they were very concerned about in the mandate. Okay? So when you're looking for the device that's right for your business, make sure it's got the right reports that you need. Okay? It is also not required to facilitate any communication at all between the dispatcher and the driver and the motor carrier. In fact, it doesn't even have to make sound. There's nothing in the mandate that says it has to make sound. But if it does make sound, it has to be mutable. Again, we're trying to prevent driver harassment. So if I'm asleep, the device cannot be making noise and waking me up while I'm asleep in the back of my truck. Okay. Okay. And then to take it one step further, We talked on the last slide about how the driver has to approve any edits, but that doesn't mean we lose track of what the original data was or who suggested the edit be made. So it's definitely okay. You're definitely expected to do some editing after the fact because life happens. Sometimes I forget to press buttons too, but we got to keep that information, the original information, there for audit purposes. Okay. And then just some other facts about ELDs. The stated purpose of this mandate is to help eliminate driver harassment. It's to make record keeping automatic and electronic, and it's to improve compliance with hours of service. But the actual hours of service rules themselves haven't changed. So if you have drivers who used to have to keep paper logs, they're probably going to have to switch to electronic logs. But the rules haven't changed. It's just the way we're tracking it has changed. And then just because we're going electronic doesn't mean the paper is going away. Drivers still have to have paper logs in their truck, but they only need to use those paper logs if the ELD stops working. So that's a compliance issue, right? My ELD stops working, I get a notification, I pull out my paper logs, I keep paper logs. And then I have 24 hours to report that there's a problem with my device and 8 days to get it fixed or replaced, during which time I have to keep paper logs. And you want to make sure you're actually keeping them. So you don't get to throw away the paper when you get your ELD back up and running. There's still record keeping you have to keep track of there. Okay. And then in case it's not completely obvious, there is some admin work that's going to be done here between adding and removing drivers and auditing logs to make sure drivers logged in and logged out on time. So there is some additional work that's going to be happening kind of in the background. Okay, exemptions. This is the fun part, right? So driveway towway is exempt. And does anybody not know what driveway towway is? Excellent, I don't have to explain it. Okay, so for me, driveway towway. So this is a picture of driveway towway. It's just, the trucks are all being towed by another truck. Now, the exemption for driveway towway only works if this truck is part of the shipment. And I'm looking at this truck, and I don't know how good the picture is in the background, but I got different paints, I got different fuel tanks, I got different wheels, I got different exhausts, and I got aerodynamics. I don't know that that truck is a part of that shipment. If it's not a part of that shipment, it has to have an ELD. If it is a part of that shipment, it doesn't have to have an ELD. So it's a little tricky. It sounds like a better exemption than maybe it is, but it's something you want to be careful about. Commercial motor vehicles older than model year 2000 don't have to have an ELD. They still can, but they don't have to. And they're using the VIN on the body to determine the model year, not the VIN on the engine. And then drivers who are using paper rods for not more than 8 days in 30 don't have to use an ELD. And then, of course, surprise, surprise, government's exempt from their own rules. These are the only exemptions I'm aware of. Has anybody heard about any other ones? Short haul? There's a lot of discussion about short haul, and I'm not sure that there's been anything set in stone about that yet. But these are the only ones I know of that are for sure.
Anybody that's currently having to do a ROD, a record of duty status on the graph, will not go to the ELD unless the 2000. So a short haul doesn't have to do a ROD today. So yeah, so they would be exempt according to the rule.
Okay. Okay. So then there were some special considerations that were addressed in the Federal Register for leased and rented vehicles. The blue text there is a quote from the Federal Register, but basically what it says is that the FMCSA is not going to dictate how lessees and lessors do business. It's going to be up to them to decide who has the ELD, who maintains it. The FMCSA is not going to say it has to be this way. They did suggest that portable units might be a good idea and that they would be acceptable. And this was the first place where I really started to hear talk about buyer beware from FMCSA. FMCSA is expecting us as a community to vet these vendors and to choose people who are the right people for us to be working with to choose to set up our businesses in the right way for us, they're not protecting us necessarily from anything. They're telling us to look out for ourselves. So it was interesting to me to see that in the Federal Register, they are expecting us to be aware of what we're getting ourselves into here. And then for both this slide and the next slide, which covers owner-operators, I want to stress that, and I think everybody in this room probably already knows this, there's a difference in the tax record-keeping requirements and the hours of service record-keeping requirements. So if I'm going to use this data for something else, I have to keep it for the record-keeping requirements for the specific thing I use the data for. And if there are determinations under IFTA or IRP, who's responsible to hold on to certain data, the ELD doesn't change any of the existing record-keeping requirements around tax. Does that make sense? Excellent. Okay. Yeah. So if you're using logbooks to create an IFTA tax return, you have to hang on to those records for the IFTA audit period. So it's just a reminder to be careful. Okay. And it's a good reason. It's a nice thing too that there are the two separate options for reports, because maybe I won't keep the hours of service report for that long, but the base data that created the report is the same, but I'm keeping this other report that's for IFTA.
I think an important distinction is the ELD is meant to track the driver. IFTA and IRP is meant to track the truck.
Yeah, they're not the same.
They're not the same, especially if a driver has a portable ELD and it goes from one unit to the next. How do you keep the distance for IFTA reporting on those other trucks that he vacated? Yeah. How's that working? And you can get in lots of trouble.
Got to be careful. Remember what the records are for and how you're using them, and cover your buns. Yes.
So if you do currently use logs to report IFTA, does it open you up for DOT audit on the hours of service for more than 6 months because you're keeping up?
I'm hearing yes. Yeah.
If you have the logs, they're audited.
Yeah. So if you're using your DOT logbooks to create your IFTA tax returns, then you have to keep your DOT logbooks for 5.5 years to cover the IFTA audit period. And so if somebody is looking at those records 3 years later, even though you might be outside and correct me here, the DOT audit period, they're still looking at them. They can't. Do they talk to each other about mileage? DOT and? Not yet might be the key answer to that question. Yeah. Okay. So same kind of story for owner operators. Okay. Again, the blue text are quotes out of the Federal Register, but it's the same thing. The FMCSA is leaving it up to each entity to decide how they want to do business. And I can see fleets offering the ELD to their drivers as hey, here's a benefit, we'll cover the ELD. But conversely, I can also see owner operators coming back and saying, you know what, for my own privacy, I'll get my own ELD. The thing you want to keep in mind, especially for us here that are IFTA agents and IRP agents, is if I have to bring data from 20 different ELDs on 20 different trucks into one IFTA tax return, you want to be thinking about system compatibility. You want to be thinking about bringing all that data together and making it seamless. Okay. Okay. Enforcement dates. So for carriers who are currently using paper logs who do not have an automatic onboard recorder, they got to be up and running by December 18th, 2017 with a certified ELD. For carriers who have an AOBR, an automatic onboard recorder, they have until 2019. But I want to stress the difference here between hours of service and GPS, because I had a really fun fight with one of my customers the other day that they had until 2019 because they have GPS. But GPS doesn't track hours of service. So that extended deadline doesn't really work for him. He needs to be up and running by 2017. Okay. And I also want, yeah. I'm not surprised. I'll talk about that. Yeah, we'll talk about that in just a sec when we get to enforcement. But I want to stress this is only 15 months away. It's 15 months away from yesterday. Has anybody started talking to their carriers about ELDs yet? Okay, fabulous. It's going to take them time to figure this out, and 15 months sounds like a lot of time, but it's really not. So we need to help them get going. Okay, so to speak to your point about in some of the shippers wanting ELDs on the road faster, sooner than the deadline, we don't know very much about what roadside inspection and enforcement is going to look like. We don't know if they're going to be issuing tickets or taking your truck. We don't know how strict they're going to be. We don't know if there's going to be a grace period. We really don't know very much. I'm going to the law enforcement workshop next week in Tampa. I'm going to be keeping my ears open for an enforcement blitz. They like to blitz. They like to do that. It wouldn't surprise me if we saw one this time around. So for me, I want to make sure that my customers not only know what device they're going to use and how to use it and have it installed, but they also know what their rights are as it goes with the kind of device that they choose. Okay. The thing I think that's consistent between everything is that the driver has to be able to demonstrate that they know how the device works at an enforcement stop, and they have to have the manual in the truck. That's, I think, consistent whether you've got an ELD or an onboard recorder. Okay. If you're using an AOBR, something that's not a certified ELD, then an officer at an enforcement stop can insist on paper. They do not have to accept the display on your screen for your logbooks. So if you're using an AOBR, you might need a printer in your truck. You might have to be able to show them the actual paper, or you can just get cited right there for not being able to show your logbooks. Okay. And if I have guys that are using onboard recorders instead of certified ELDs, I want them to know about that. I don't want them to get caught unawares. And then it's important also, I think, to note that law enforcement is trying to learn this along with the rest of us. And in my opinion, a best defense is a good offense. So while they're trying to learn and while we're trying to learn, I'd rather be a little bit ahead of the curve than behind it. I have heard talk that there might be a two-phase enforcement period where we get some transition and awareness before we get compliance, but I can't confirm that with anybody, and we might be in this phase right now for all I know. This doesn't mean there's going to be a grace period. It just means that they're learning and transitioning right along with us. Okay, so I took this screenshot this morning. This is the current list of FMCSA self-certified vendors. I think there's 10 here. I can't count very well though, so maybe you all want to count with me. But the FMCSA is allowing vendors to self-certify that their device is a compliant ELD. I have heard through the grapevine that 3 of these vendors are being investigated by FMCSA, that 1 is being sued and that 1 is going bankrupt. Again, I cannot substantiate that information, but that's what's out there on the grapevine. And remember, the FMCSA has said buyer beware. So if somebody is going bankrupt and they're up on this list, that's on us to know or not know. Okay. Now, lots of these companies, you guys probably can't read the names too well because I can't read them too well. But most of these companies are not names I know. They're not names from the industry. And we'll talk in a minute about where the big names are and why they're not on this list yet. But I want to talk a little bit just about the self-certification thing first. So people on this list have been neither approved nor endorsed, can you hear my air quotes in that, by the FMCSA. So does anybody else get mad when they heard that? I see a few hands, right? Because we have to comply with this, but we can't be certain if they're really compliant until we look at it, until we vet it ourselves and figure that out. And again, this is a good time to remember the different data requirements and the record-keeping requirements when you're looking at who these people are. If they're new to the industry, do they know you have to keep logbooks for 5.5 years if you used them to create your IFTA taxes? Do they know that? Are they aware? Are they involved in learning about the industry? Are they a part of the industry? These are the kind of questions that I would want to ask a vendor. So I'm going to be checking out all the vendors on this list. I've already begun, and I'm going to be asking them the tough questions like, do they know about the record keeping requirements? Do they know what IFTA and IRP stand for? Because not all of them do. Do they know about the different kind of reports I'm going to be asking for? How long are they going to store this data for an audit, or do I need to store it for my customers? I'm going to ask all those tough questions and a lot more. And that's one of the reasons I'm really glad that some of these vendors are here today, so I can meet them in person and shake their hands and look them in the eyes and figure out if they really know figure out if they know what's going on, because I'm going to be making recommendations to my carriers about what I think they should do. Okay. Oh, I'm down to 5. Oh, you have a question?
Well, I just had a comment.
Yes.
In that, some of those or all of those could be a compliant ELD and meet all of the criteria you've talked about. But if the company does not have good internal controls and doesn't use the equipment properly, they're still out of compliance. So it's having the right equipment and then instituting the right internal controls in order to make sure it's working like it's supposed to.
Yeah. This isn't as simple as just plugging something into the truck and moving along. Yes.
If you look at that list, there's one two different devices on there with two different prices on there, and they do completely different things. So again, something to look at is they're on there doesn't mean that they don't have different devices that do different things.
Okay. So if you guys want to be checking out this link for yourself, the list for yourself, the link is here. I have it bookmarked. I look at it most mornings when I get in. Ooh, how many new ones are there today? Oh, did you want a picture of that one? Say again. You want me to read it out? https://3 P for Papa, D for Delta, P for Papa, .fmcsa.gov/ELD/ELD list.aspx. Yeah, it should also be on the thumb drive. Okie dokie. It's my understanding. They said they are compliant. They've said yes. We'll talk about how they can go through that in just a sec and why some of the people, the names we recognize aren't on the list. But as far as I know, guys in the back, am I wrong about that? They just say, put me on the list. I'm seeing yeses. For AOBRs? For ELD? But then the new mandate came out and they reset it, I'm guessing? Yeah. Okay. So, why aren't the big names here, the industry names that we know? Okay. I've been tracking this down for 10 months. This is why I wanted to do this presentation, is because I wanted the answer to this question. It was bothering me. There had to be a good reason. There had to be more than one reason, and I found 4. The first is that the FMCSA is creating a system called ERODS. It's what they're going to use to audit either a carrier or a vendor to see if they are compliant with the ELD mandate. A lot of the big names I've spoken to say they don't want to self-certify until they can test their system with ERODS. Makes sense. How can you be certain that your interpretation matches the FMC's interpretation unless you use the same thing to test that they would use to test? So a lot of people they say they're ready to rock, they're ready to go, but they're waiting for this one last piece to just be 100%. Okay. Another reason I found is that the FMCSA test cases are 440 pages. They're extremely unclear and they're incomplete. So the FMCSA has started an FAQ page, but these test procedures are what the vendors are supposed to be using to verify that they are really certified. And if they're not really complete, they don't really cover every situation, then how can they certify? How can they say they really know? So some of the questions like what to do with a mechanic's driving time, that's key because mechanics drive these trucks every day after they fix them, and that time is logged, and where does it go? Okay. Another one was the data transfer methods. This might seem really simple. I mean, USB, Bluetooth, email, these are words we use every day. I'm just going to give you the data, right? But just because I give you data doesn't mean you can open the file that I gave to you. Just because you can open the file doesn't mean you can read the file. And email and web service are dependent on me having a cell signal so that I can send the data to you. Now, if I get stopped in the mountains, that's not going to be too easy to achieve. So at a roadside stop, these are the options that law enforcement has to receive data, and they're not all easy. And then web service here, the last one here is bolded because that's a website that the FMCSA is supposed to build and host, which would allow the driver to upload data to FMCSA that an enforcement officer can then look at. Well, but that website doesn't exist yet. Kind of like ERODS, it's not done yet. And kind of like ERODS, we don't really know when it will exist. Kind of like UCR, he says. So, so there's some people are waiting to certify their device until they know how enforcement is going to look, until they know how this data transfer stuff is going to go. And then it's important to remember that the states are also still in training, just like we're trying to learn, like law enforcement is trying to learn. The states are going to have to be able to read and access this data, and there's a job for them to do there as well. And until they know how they're going to do it, hard for the ELD vendors to know how they're going to facilitate that. Yes. Hi, Jeff. Hi. Thanks. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes. Okay.
So we're not going to use ELDs to audit them.
Oh.
We use in terms of auditing devices,
Mm-hmm.
we use ELDs to audit the service.
Ah.
The test procedures we use to actually, if there was a report of a non-compliant device, the test procedure we use by us to go after and use them against the device and verify. It's the same model that NATSA uses for their components, or the EPA uses for engines, those types.
Sure.
Of things. So I just wanted to make the
thank you.
But again,
it is. And like I said, I've been looking at this for 10 months and I still didn't get it all 100%. So if I'm looking at this for 10 months, and that's how long this has been going on, there's a lot of people that still have a lot of unanswered questions too. We're not the only ones that are trying to figure this out. Okay. And to that point, this is kind of where when I was working with Dale from OIDA, he was saying, I want drivers to slow down because some of these things could change. We don't know how the mandate is going to react to some of these industry questions and what's going to happen next. He doesn't want his members to get caught up and to buy a big device and then find out later it's not going to meet their needs. Okay, so he says slow down and wait. But me, this is where I'm going to get a little bit personal with y'all, in case I don't do that anyway. This is where I see a really, really big opportunity to kind of take things to the next level with my customers. And I'm going to go after that opportunity personally. So my transition plan for my customers began last week. It was going to begin when I got home, but then I realized we've got 15 months and I needed to get started. I know my clients, y'all know your clients too, right? Yeah? They're going to need time, right? They're going to need to budget money and time to get this done. Annual budgets are coming up here real quick, and for a lot of people in December and January, they need to know what this is going to cost them and figure out how they're going to pay for it. They need time to plan. And honestly, I'm going to try and scare my clients a little bit. I want them to get on board, and I want them to get on board early. If they I know there's a lot of resistance out there where people say, I'm not going to get this, I'm going to wait until the last second. Okay, well, if you're going to wait until the last minute, then you need to expect last minute problems, and I may or may not be able to help you with those last minute problems. Like if there's a problem with shipping. Seems to me last month, the whole state of Louisiana was underwater. If you're in Louisiana trying to get a device and there's a weather problem, you're not going to get it on time. And if there's an enforcement blitz, you're going to be stuck. If there's an enforcement blitz and you're calling customer service trying to learn how to use your device at roadside, you might have a little bit of trouble getting through right there in that one moment when things just have to get done. Could be technical difficulties. You could have trouble training drivers. I do have funny stories. If people want to know about how to train reluctant drivers, ask me later. But all this stuff is going to take time. And if you wait until the last minute, you're going to have last minute problems. But for me, that's kind of where the bad news ends, because when I have access to this data that's going to come from ELDs, me, the IFTA agent, me, the tax preparer, I'm going to be able to improve the quality of work that I'm doing, and I'm probably going to also be able to offer new services, okay? So the opportunity that I see is that if I can get ahead of this for my clients and help them get set up the right way, like, my way, the right way, then I'm going to be able to leverage the devices and do a better job on my IFTA tax returns, because I'm not going to spend hours and hours and days and weeks chasing down my drivers trying to get trip sheets. How long does it take y'all to get trip sheets? Does it take days or weeks? So it can take the whole quarter. If I get my guys on the right ELD solution, the data will just get sent to me when I request it. And I don't have to waste that time waiting around anymore. And if I'm not wasting my time, then I can do a better job. If I can do a better job and I still have time left over, then I'm going to be looking at that data for new things I can do with it. I was at the ALK Technology Conference the beginning of the summer. Everybody knows ALK, right? They do PC Miler, Trimble, they do maps. They host a technology summit every summer. And they talked about the huge percentage of data that carriers are not using yet. The data is available because of these devices, ELDs, AOBRs, rear and front facing cameras, all the technology that's collecting data, and it is saving people money on their insurance, on their crashes, on their fuel reports, okay? The list goes on and on and on. And I mean, this is the easy stuff, right? The new services I'm going to add are log auditing. I'm going to start helping these guys keep track and make sure that their logs are in good shape. I'm not going to have to chase them down for the logbooks. I'll be able to do it in the time I saved not waiting around for trip sheets. And I'll keep my staff busy in the meantime, right? I'm going to be looking at their NPG and letting them know which trucks are wasting fuel. They hopefully already know that, but this is going to help me help them save money. Never. And then, I mean, the amount of data that's going to be coming in is phenomenal, and what you can do with it, the sky's the limit. And if you're paying attention the right way, I think these devices can end up saving your carriers more money than they cost them. But only if you're looking at it the right way and if you're ahead of the game. If you're waiting until the last minute, we're still going to be scrambling looking for trip sheets. And for me, that's just kind of the beginning of the good news, right? A lot of the vendors that I've spoken with, I talked to 3 vendors on the same day, and they all said, I got a guy at Verizon. He'll get you free tablets. He just wants the data plan. I don't have to buy a tablet to make my ELD work. That saves my guys a lot of money. And a lot of the vendors I spoke with had contacts like that all over the place. A lot of the vendors I spoke with were willing to talk to me about discounts. I represent 500 trucks that are going to need an ELD in the next 15 months. I've got a little bargaining power if I've got time. And a lot of the vendors that I talk to are willing to make the digital data, which is what I've been talking about for the last 5 minutes, available to IFTA agencies, and they're not charging me a fee to get it. They're just making it available to me. And some of them are even promising not to tell IFTA services to my customers. So I don't want to get left behind. I want to be ahead of this, and I want to make this work for me. But I think it's all good news. I think that's the thing I learned in the last 10 months is that this is good news. I think the big elephant in the room is that many ELD vendors are providing IFTA services, and for a lot of us, that's sort of the backbone of our business. That's where everything starts. And I talked to several NATSA members who knew I was doing this research, and they said, they're going to put me out of business, these ELDs. What am I going to do? They're going to take my business away. And that's why it was so important to me that I build good partnerships with the ELD vendor, my client, and me. And we work together as a team to make things go forward well. Because the thing that us in here know, that maybe the owner operators, the individual carriers that aren't doing their own taxes don't know, is that GPS reports aren't perfect. Tax prep is a lot more than just putting numbers on a piece of paper and signing the bottom of it. There's still a really important job here in reviewing and preparing taxes that I'm not sure if that's what the ELD vendor is specifically selling or not. But that's what I do. That's what I'm selling is tax prep. I'm selling audit support. So I'm trying to make my job easier. I'm trying to build a really strong team between the ELD, the carrier, and me. And I think that when you do that, it seems like things will go really well. That's my thought, anyway. So that's my plan, and that's my thoughts on ELDs. And now I want to, and I want to just thank these people. These people all helped me prepare the presentation and make sure everything was correct, and we all agreed in our interpretation. So thank you, everybody, for your help and questions. Yes, Miss Linda, I knew I could count on you. Yeah. So, no, never. But let me see here. And the manual, the link to the manual is right. It's here somewhere. Right, this one. So it's here, and it has to be in the truck. That's in the mandate. So whoever you pick. And there was an interesting article that Suna from eRoad sent me a couple of days ago, and it talked about how only one of the manuals on this list says on the front page, keep this in the truck. And that's a big deal. That's part of the mandate. So you got to know about it. Yes.
What will we go into technology? Eliminate paper. Not a requirement we keep it in the truck.
Well, just this one piece of paper, though. Actually, most of them are supposedly quite short. Just because it's just here, this button does this. Here's how you get this. Yes.
You stated that if the ELD malfunctions, you got to keep paper logs.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if that ELD malfunctions and you lost your previous week, you had to go back and recreate those on paper at that point?
Any of my vendors know the answer to that question? If you're, say again?
Yes,
They have to be in the truck.
So my question is 5 years from now, when everybody's on ELDs, there isn't going to be a single driver that's going to remember how to do a paper log. That's the skill.
One of the manuals came with 5 or 8 log sheets in the back of the manual. So in case this is gone, here's your logbook pages, and here's how you fill those out. So, I mean, I want to work with a vendor that's out to protect my customers, that's out to help them and to help me. Because together, I mean, there's enough business, I think, for all of us, and together we can do a really phenomenal job of serving them. I think this is good news.
One more thing to say is that a lot of these ELD providers are going to be able to provide additional services such as if the reporting, if the routing, and whatnot. But if the IRP do not have a website like this where they recommend any type of software to use, so if somebody says that they have qualified, it's because they meet the definitions of that. If you look on the IRP or if the website, you will see the qualifications on there, but they will not recommend any type of software. They just have to meet those qualifications.
Well, who's never been lied to by a salesperson? You just don't know you've been lied to. So I mean, the sales guys will say what they need to say, but I want to vet. I'm going to take to my customers a list of 2 or 3 vendors and say, pick one of these. I trust these guys. I vouch for these guys. I'll get to you. You're next.
I was just going to say something about the IFTA. I've been doing it for a long, long time and been through a billion audits. And what I've been telling my customers since a year ago was, if you switch ELDs, who's going to do your audit for you? Because the audit that you're going to get is 5 years from now, and if you use 5 different ELD vendors, and then you call me to do your IFTA audit, I'm going to charge you a lot more money because I didn't do your IFTA fuel taxes for the audit period in question. So keep using me because you're hiring me for that one audit because you know I do it right, and that's kind of my sales pitch that I've been throwing at them, because it can get really expensive if I didn't do your IFTAs during the period.
And I know there's a lot of resistance to ELDs. A lot of people think, oh, my guys, they're never going to switch. But everybody who's switched to an ELD loves it and isn't going back. So that perceived resistance is kind of fading as we get closer and closer.
I was just going to make a comment that the IRP does not have any the bosses that they recommend, and 80% of my customers are owner operators, and they don't know. You know,
They don't.
And I mean, I get on the phone with the vendor of the GPS. Now, we're compliant. I said, you're compliant to who?
Yeah.
DOT. Well, that's not if the IRP. And the owner, I mean, they don't know. They go and buy it, and they're told it's compliant, so they think it's compliant for everything.
Right.
And unfortunately, when they buy those devices, they're looking for the cheapest price versus the compliance that they need.
But again, and I hate to sound like a broken record, but that's why I want to talk to my customers about ELDs first, before the vendors do, before they hear about it on the grapevine and their buddy got something that was free and is perfect, you know. I want to talk to them first. I want to warn them about the audit requirements. I want to talk to them about record keeping. I want to inoculate them against the sales guy that could lie to them. I want to help. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yep.
They are thinking about, carrier education. Do they put it on their website so carriers see when they file their IFTA? Hey, make sure your ELDs are compliant if you're using it for IFTA. So there's a big discussion right now about how the states are going to deal with this, and they actually are reaching out to us as industry. How do we work together to get it done? So this is a great chance for us to help them because they're struggling just as much as we are.
Yeah.
Just to tag on to that,
Yeah.
You all know that in February of every year, the IFTA IRP has a workshop for auditors that it's 2 or 3 days.
And it's fabulous.
And it's fabulous, where they obviously go through the audit process, and industry is welcome to attend. And this February, it's going to focus on GPS, this GPS
Yeah, they're
data.
gonna have a hands-on. They're gonna try to get GPS vendors around the others that can walk around and play with the data and talk to each vendor, hands-on audit type.
So it would be a good event to attend if you do IFTA audits or IRP audits. This would be good.
In February, it's going to be in Houston.
It's in Houston. All right. Just an FYI, our texting question thing is kind of not working so well. So if you have questions that you've been texting, you probably should get with Millard and just kind of tell him what the question is, because we're having some technical difficulties there.
But anybody's also willing to pick my brain anytime. If you don't want to ask a question right now in front of everybody, I'm easy to find.
Okay, y'all are doing great. Thank you, Casey.